Hi, and welcome back to 10-Minute Bible. This is a series in which we're looking at Luke's story of Jesus, the Gospel according to Luke in the Bible. If you haven't read the first few pages of it, you might want to just pause and do that for a moment. If you do that, then what I'm about to say will make a little more sense. Also, the previous videos, the first 5, could also be very helpful in the same regard. This is number 6 of the series, so welcome and thanks for joining in. My name is Michael Venema, and this video, I'm calling it The Day That Jesus Was Almost Lynched. So a little bit of background. Up to this point in Luke's story, we've discovered that Jesus' birth was one of a number of remarkable births in the Bible, a kind of a string of them. The first ones are back in the pre-Jesus parts of the Bible in the Old Testament, and Jesus' birth, the most remarkable of them all. Jesus also turns out to be supported by the Jewish line of prophets, the line of Jewish prophets, by the prophetic tradition, John the Baptist embodying all of that. And we also discover that Jesus is born in poverty, while the Roman Empire ground down the Jewish people of Jesus. Jesus is born, and the Roman Empire, considering itself the bringer of peace. For Luke, Jesus is the true bringer of peace, and Luke intends for us to notice this contrast. Early on in Jesus' childhood, we discover that he is knowledgeable on Jewish law. He engages with the Jewish teachers and I think does quite well at the age of 12 already. Jesus also is validated not so much by the religious authorities, but by the devout Jewish people who are waiting for God to act and to rescue the Jewish people from Roman oppression. Jesus is baptized, and during the baptism in the Jordan River by John the Baptist, the Holy Spirit comes upon Jesus, empowering him. And also at the baptism, God authorizes Jesus. God validates Jesus in all he will do. So Jesus is being prepared to go public by God himself. And then Luke provides a family tree, a genealogy of Jesus, which goes back quite a ways. Includes King David of the Jewish people, includes the father of all the Jewish people, Abraham, and goes all the way back to the first humans as they are depicted in the Bible. And for Luke, Luke means to signal by going back to the first humans. Luke means to signal that whatever Jesus is up to, it is aimed at the entire human community. Jesus is for all people. And then at the beginning of chapter 4, Jesus is tempted by Satan, and he does pretty well. So Jesus there reverses what happened to the first humans when they were tempted. In one of the opening stories of the Bible, they fail. Jesus does not. So in that sense, Jesus revisits the temptation scene, and also puts Satan on notice that his days are numbered and that he has met his match. So now we're ready for the second part of chapter 4 of Luke. And if you haven't read it yet, maybe pause the video if you would like. Maybe take a look at the printed copy you may have in front of you. If you want to look it up online, BibleGateway.com. I use a version of the Bible called The Message. Anyway, let's dive into this story. It's a very interesting one. It begins by Jesus going up to northern Israel, Galilee, and he's at the top of his game. You know, he's been baptized, empowered. He's just defeated Satan in round 1. And his teaching is being well received. He then visits his hometown, Nazareth. He was born in Bethlehem, raised in Nazareth. And while he's there, he goes to the Jewish synagogue, which is not unusual for him to do, the typical teaching place. And he is given the privilege of helping to lead the worship service, reading from the Jewish prophet Isaiah, a very significant passage. And this is the passage. God's Spirit is on me. He's chosen me to preach the message of good news to the poor, sent me to announce pardon to prisoners and recovery of sight to the blind, to set the burdened and battered free, to announce this is God's year to act. I think that people were puzzled. What are you saying, Jesus? Are you saying that this is the year that God's going to set us free from Roman oppression? Are you saying, Jesus, that somehow you are at the center of God's activity in doing this? The people are puzzled, and Jesus says, this is now being fulfilled right in your presence, and so. The people are not only puzzled, but I think they're a bit taken aback that Jesus would have the audacity to claim that or to imply that he's got some role in this stunning work that God is apparently about to do. And so an argument ensues. What, Jesus? You used to play the streets here. We knew your mom and dad. You're just an ordinary person. I mean, people are enjoying your teaching and so forth at this point, but don't let it go to your head. And then there's a little more arguing back and forth, and Jesus says to the people, well, no doubt you're going to throw back in my face this little saying, doctor, here, heal yourself. So don't try to, help other people, look after yourself. And also people were, in Jesus' understanding, they were suggesting or taunting Jesus with this notion, Jesus, why don't you do something impressive here, as you did in Capernaum, which was a village not too far away, and not too far away also from Cana, which from the other gospel stories we know that Jesus had done some very impressive things. And so there's this taunting and arguing going on, and then Jesus tells the people a story which was kind of offensive to them. Jesus mentions another Jewish prophet, not Isaiah this time, but Elijah, also a very famous prophet in the pre-Jesus parts of the Bible, the Old Testament. And Jesus tells the story of how God sent Elijah to just a limited number of people, and so that Elijah passed by a lot of Jewish people, then a lot of Jewish towns. And the implication, I think, if I've got this right, the implication is that if God is up to something really great, Nazareth is probably going to be passed by. If you're going to argue about, Jesus and these kinds of things and all the things he's doing, you're not going to welcome what he's got, then don't be surprised if God passes you by. Well, the people were offended, I think, for one thing, if God was going to rescue the Israelites, the Jewish people, from their difficulties, certainly they would want to be included and would be very hurt not to be in, and are understandably offended if it's suggested to them that is the case. But I think that is what is being suggested to them. So they get mad. Earlier this evening, I was at a protest, a Black Lives Matter protest. And there were a number of speakers. One speaker got up and started speaking in a way that was contrary to the overall tone and the messages of all the other speakers. And it didn't take long for the mood of the crowd to change and to get quite hostile. Loud comments. A few people, I'm not sure if rushing the platform is quite the right expression, but a few people approaching the platform in anger and demanding that the person be shut down. And if you've ever been in a situation like that, you know how quickly a mob mentality can take root. I found it a little bit unnerving to be in that situation. But in the so it gives a little bit of light into what was happening when Jesus was with these villagers in Nazareth, and they got offended, and they took it quite a few steps further. They crowded Jesus out of the synagogue, and they kind of crowded him up this hillside, and they were going to throw him off a height to kill him. Jesus walks away from this situation. He heads out of town. He goes back to Capernaum, where again he is well received. In Capernaum, Jesus is confronted by a man who is he is inhabited by an evil spirit, a demonic spirit, and the demonic spirit understands who Jesus is. And he says, "What business do you have here, Jesus? I know what you're up to. You've come to destroy us, which is true. And Jesus, the way it puts it in my Bible, shut him up, quiet, get out of him, and the demonic spirit left the person that the spirit was inhabiting. And everyone in the village is quite impressed. Who is this that when he speaks, things actually happen? They had had many rabbis teaching them over the years, and these were all good people, and they taught well and so forth, but it's not as if when they spoke that impressive things happened, miracles happened. And yet when Jesus is on the scene and he begins to speak, this kind of thing, miraculous things do happen. So at the end of the story, we discover, just as we did in the story previous to that where Jesus was tempted, that the arrival of Jesus on the scene means that the world of dark powers, the demonic world, is being threatened, and it's being revealed that the demonic world is going to be defeated. So Jesus is the revelation of God, and he is going to put an end to all the dark powers that pester us and that have made our lives miserable. So I think just to conclude this particular reading, it's an impressive passage, I think, for two reasons. First is it undercuts the image of Jesus as being kind of a teacher who floats away from one village to another and saying nice things, and somehow, for reasons which are a little bit hard to understand, even though he was a nice guy, he was crucified for it. Jesus is not at all that kind of a figure. He's engaged, he can offend people, but he is God's revelation, and he has come to initiate the work of God, and he will complete it. And by the time God's work in Jesus Christ is complete, the demonic world will be shattered. So that's good news for you and me, because you may have noticed, but there are many calamities, darkened people and darkened communities, and very disturbing and painful things happening in our world all the time, and we need to be released from these things. Friends, with Jesus Christ, yes, we can count on that. So that's the end of our Bible time. So thank you for joining in, and next time we'll go a little further. We'll finish up chapter 4. We'll look at Jesus doing some more healings, and we get to see some of Jesus' first disciples. So the story continues. Thanks for joining in, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.